you're buying a true vintage 1940s dress, one of the things that can set the price tag soaring is if the dress has soutache decoration, and particularly if that soutache decoration is in self fabric, i.e. the same fabric from which the dress is made. And soutache decoration was particularly popular in the 1940s because it's a way to add decorative details to a dress for very little money, which in today's climate, I think the 1940s has a lot of inspiration for us. So soutache decoration could be added with bought piping cord and stitched onto the dress, or it could be made from the fabric you were making the dress from. It's actually quite easy to make. If you want to add soutache decoration to any dress and it looks particularly in keeping with the era to use a 1940s pattern, you need to look for a pattern which has a suitable area or feature for adding the decoration. So the pattern that I chose is this one from the Vintage Sewing Pattern Company, and the reason I chose it for the soutache, you can actually see it on the illustration that it has some soutache added because it has this large curvy eye-catching waistband, and it also has a little yoke shoulder area that is perfect for adding the soutache to. So I'm going to get on and show you how I made the dress and how I added the soutache. Oh, and I did put in the title that this was my most popular make ever on Instagram, and that's because I made the dress just before it got really hot in the summer, and actually I only started publishing videos in the summer, so I made it, but this is the first time that I'm actually showing the process of making it, but it was especially popular on Instagram, so I hope you're going to like it too. I started by making a mock-up of the bodice, not the skirt, and it actually fitted quite well from the pattern. I was lucky. So I went ahead and cut out the dress. The skirt's actually made up of 8 panels, 4 at the front and 4 at the back. Then I cut out all the pattern pieces, being as economic with the fabric as possible, of course. Then I cut out strips of bias binding, which is going to enclose the neck edge, and this is the yoke piece, or 2 pieces that are joined together in the centre back, and the bias binding just wraps around that neck edge as I'm showing, and then I've stitched it right side to right side here, and then I'm just going to turn it under to the wrong side and press and slip stitch it down, and the yoke is then turned over to create this shape, which you can see on the pattern too, just curving around the shoulders, and then the edge I'm pointing out beneath the bias binding closure around the neck, that's just turned under and it's going to be top stitched in place on the bodice. You can see where I've got to here with the yoke attached to the bodice. The bodice is gathered between notches marked on the pattern on either side, and it's just gathered to create a little bit of fullness over the bust, and then the yoke is top stitched down and the whole of the neck edge is bound with bias binding, and this yoke area just below the top of the shoulders is a perfect place to position some decorative soutache. So then it's time to attach the curvy waistband to the bodice, and as you can see I just turned under the edge because it's going to be top stitched in place. You gather just up to those notches, and then it's time to carefully pin the waistband in place. And you can see that the waistband forms a perfect place for soutache decoration. Then I've tacked or basted the waistband to the bodice using quite small stitches, because you can see that curve and the way it dips down. It's quite tricky getting the fabric to lie flat in that area, so I wanted to make sure that I had got the pieces to lie as flat as I could possibly get them. And then I'm pinning the back waistband to the back, and it's just pressed down on one edge and top stitched in position in the same way as the front, except it's easier because it's just a straight waistband. So I'm just pinning that down and showing you Foxy, one of my imaginatively named pin cushions. I love to make pin cushions. You can see he's got different coloured eyes and a nice smiley mouth. And he's just made of scraps of fabric stuffed, and I gave him a little fluffy needle felted tail, and he stands upright too, so he's a little sewing friend. And then I've just tacked or basted the waistband onto the back before stitching. And then the front and back bodice are top stitched down, and you can see that I'm still a bit worried this is going to lie flat, but it should do with the press, and it's holding the gathers into position. And then I need to join it now to the back bodice. So I started by pinning the shoulder seams and then around the back neck edge, clipping in just onto those curves to give it a bit of ease around that neck edge. And then I pin the side edges together all the way down the right side and just part of the way down the left side, because that's where the zip fastener is going to go. And then I stitched everything together, and this is how the bodice is looking. So you can see that the neck is stitched there around the back, and then the gathering is stitched down by the top stitching on the bodice. And then the next thing was to join the sides of each sleeve along the underarms. Then it was time to join the skirt panels together, and if you wonder why I've pinned little bits of envelope onto those panels, it's just to remind me which pieces are the front and which pieces are the side and which pieces are the back. Although I should know, because you can see that front piece I'm pointing out, that just shapes into the curved waistband where it sort of points upwards at the centre front. And this is the skirt joined to the waistband and bodice just prior to machine stitching. So I've just got the basting or tacking stitches in because it was quite fiddly actually. I just needed to make sure that the centre seam of the skirt hit directly that point of the curved waistband, and also to make sure everything lay as flat as possible. And then onto the sleeves, I started with the cuff area, gathering up that cuff and also cutting into that cuff area of the sleeve as I've shown, because there's going to be a button opening. So you stitch around the three sides of the cuff and a little bit onto that fourth side that you're going to join to the sleeve. And that's just to create a little overlap for the buttonhole over the button, and it's just obviously going to fasten around the wrist like that, with just that little overlap so that you can button it down. And then it's stitched onto the sleeves right sides together, and then folded over onto the inside and slip stitched in place, and obviously aligning the opening on the sleeve with the button. And then the sleeves fit into the armholes quite easily, as you can see. It's with a bit of ease perhaps, but no gathering. And then I'm also going to make little shoulder pads. And then I just need to put in a zip where I've left an opening on that left side and make the shoulder pads. And I'm just making little triangular ones, and I'm just cutting out the padding there. And then on to designing my soutache, and I'm just reaching for this book on Japanese design motifs, which has been so useful for so many things. And I've thought of this butterfly motif, which seems to be marked by a green and black chocolate wrapper, sadly empty. But yes, I was thinking of perhaps doing this little butterfly, which is quite linear and I think could work really well in soutache. But there are so many ideas in this book for all kinds of things. You can see how lots of these designs could lend themselves to soutache. A motif like this could work really nicely too, with that kind of petal design. But I'm going to go with my butterfly motif, and I've started making my piping for the soutache. And you make it in a similar way to bias binding, cutting out fabric on the cross, folding it as you would for bias binding, but then folding it over double again. And you then stitch through all the layers to create this very flexible piping. And I know that some people say you can machine stitch through all the layers, but for this fabric, hand stitching was better. And I wanted to just make some little kind of balls for the butterfly antennae. So I cut out these circles of fabric, and then I did a running gathering stitch around the edges, pulled it up around the polyfill, and then just stitched it to form these little fabric balls, which I'm going to place at the top of the butterfly's antennae. So this is proving trickier than anticipated, because if you are just basically using one long cord, one line to keep wrapping around, it's amazing how it actually matters whether it goes over or under the piece that you've already placed, if you see what I mean. So it's definitely not something that you can do in a hurry. On the yoke, I did my own butterfly design, which was much more simple and a lot easier. And then I stitched everything by hand, obviously, down in place, which also took quite a while. And then it was time for the reveal. I'm just buttoning the dress up at the cuffs. I found some nice vintage buttons, and as you can see, the sleeves are quite full and the dress is quite fitted, with that nice kind of gathering over the bust area. And hopefully you also think the soutache makes it a little bit special. I'm pleased with the olive green colour, and I stitched down the butterfly's antennae just with those little balls at the end, although I'm not actually sure that anybody else but me would be certain that they were butterflies. But still, it looks like decorative soutache, and actually most soutache didn't form a figurative shape. It was just, in a kind of pattern, and that's just showing off the little black and brass vintage buttons I used, and the zip fastening on the left side. And the dress is made of a double weight wool crepe, so quite cosy for autumn and winter. Thank you so much for watching me, and I hope you all consider liking this video and subscribing, and I'll see you next week.